wives, if you want to see your husband changed, pray for him. Early on in our marriage, I'd been away speaking down in Florida on something, and God was working in my heart and convicting me, and I called Kim, and I said, well, I'm heading back, and she said, okay, and all I said was, I got a lot of talking to do when I get home. I haven't necessarily been living with you in an understanding way. And I remember when I got home and I started to pour that out to Kim, Kim said something like, wow, this seems so unfair. She said, for years, I've been thinking I had to tell you, and this week I have just committed to praying for you, and now I'm thinking, wow, I should have done that a lot earlier, right? And God could have worked on your heart. Listen, God works on your husband's heart better than you work on his heart.
That constant drip of, man, my mom or my dad is just always kind of on me. They're just kind of like nagging me. And for a child, they can just kind of feel that. Which doesn't mean that as a parent that I have to stop giving my child direction. It's not in what you're saying, it's how we're saying it. And oftentimes, if I can just adjust my tone, if I can just pause and think, oftentimes my delivery is different.
Well, take your Bibles and turn with me to Colossians chapter 3. That is where we are this morning. Colossians chapter 3. If you've been with us throughout the course of the summer, you know we've been talking about learning to love and what that looks like in relationships with one another, with each other within the church, key qualities that we need just in loving one another well. Last week, Pastor Scott talked with you about parent-child relationship a little bit, but we have to come back and catch a message that I was unable to finish, and maybe that's why some of you are here today. You just didn't know it, because we covered the women's side, the wife's side in the marriage relationship, but we didn't thoroughly get to the husband's side, and so that's where we're going to be this morning. This is Marital Matters. Now, you may remember, just by way of review, ladies, this is for you because I've been away for a couple weeks. The first part of that passage says, wives, submit to your husbands, Colossians chapter 3, verse 18, as is fitting in the Lord. Now, if you weren't here, we covered a lot of things about what submission is not, and that's valuable to understand in our day and age, but we also talked about what it would look like. And there were three elements, but I just want to review just the first one, if I could. It is a willingness to see your primary role in the marriage as supporting your husband's spiritual growth and leadership. That's a primary role. That's not your only role. There's other things to do. I understand that, but this is your primary role. Sometimes women might be a bit offended by that in our culture. Like, what do you mean I'm supposed to help my husband? Like, I want to be my own person. And while you certainly are entitled to use all of your unique gifts in the way that God has designed, I would remind you that the idea of helping your husband isn't a negative thing. In fact, look at how God actually designed it in Genesis chapter 2. He said, then the Lord said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make a helper fit for him. And you say, well, that helper word doesn't sound very important. But think how important it is, because in Psalm 70, we read down in verse 5, the psalmist said, but I am poor and needy. Hasten to me, O God, you are my help. Same Hebrew word. And my deliverer, O Lord, do not delay. In other words, God himself uses this word to describe his role in our lives. Now, one final word of review for our wives who are here this morning. 4 ways that you can support your husband's growth, and here they are. Pray daily, live consistently, serve patiently, speak respectfully. So that's all by way of review. If you want to go back and catch that in a podcast or something, you can. That part of the message was only for the wives. Out of speak respectfully, by the way, just look at Ephesians 5:33 one more time. However, let each one of you, that is every husband, love his wife as himself, and the wife should see that she respects her husband. So we see this love and respect paradigm working for us in the marriage relationship. Now, that brings us to the text for this morning. But before we get there, okay, I just got to show you this picture because I'm going to talk to husbands. And these are the 2 newest members of our congregation here, I think, 2 of our newest members. That's Zeke Carlton with the shirt that says he's the hunk, okay? And that's Ruby Brucker sitting there next to him. And this is hashtag making your man listen, okay? I love this picture because I'm about to speak to husbands, and some of the husbands are saying, I kind of got that posture that Zeke has right here, okay? And some of the wives are saying, yep, that's why I'm going to give him an elbow in the chest and a knee in the gut. Okay, that's what I'm going to do to get my husband to pay attention to what's happening here. Okay, now, let me put a qualifier on all of this. Okay, here's the thing. This process, men, of covering your ears, that starts really, really young. Okay, and wives, this process of sharpening your elbow, just let you know, that starts really, really young too. Okay, but here's what I want you to realize this morning. Wives, this lesson is for your husband, okay? Husbands, I know there's reasons why you try to cover your ears. And let me just start with a brief word of confession. When I was in seminary, my Hebrew professor said to me once, I just remember where he was standing in the classroom. It sounded like he was speaking to me, but he was addressing the whole classroom. He said, I put a number of good sermons back in the file because I wasn't living them yet. Okay? And I remember thinking, that sounds so great. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put good sermons back in the file if I'm not living them. Okay. The only problem with that was once I started preaching, Sundays kept coming. Right? Sunday after Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. And I soon realized there were a lot of things that I was trying to live, but I wasn't living fully yet. Okay. One of those, by way of confession before I get started, is being a good husband. If you want to know Pastor Phil's husband-like flaws, okay, there is a person in the congregation you could ask and she could tell you, right? I prefer that you not, right? But I'm just going to tell you before we start, that's all part of the process. One of the reasons sometimes I cover my ears is because I look back at my life and I think, man, I keep trying, but I can't seem to quite get that one right. And so I stop trying. You don't want to cover your ears. There's 4 simple principles today for you as a man, and you're going to look at some of those, and you're going to say, I tried that. I'm still trying. I'm discouraged. Just say to the Lord, Lord, I'm committing this to you. I'm going to do my best to do this. I'm going to depend on your grace. I'm not going to think I can do it on my own. Just talk to the Lord that way, but don't cover your ears, right? So here they are. Our responsibilities. You'll find in verse 19 in Colossians chapter 3 this word, husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. That's a great word for men. We are to love. Our wives were to support us or submit, but we were to love them well. It's almost like God says, I know this is going to be hard for you to do, men, so I'm going to give you one thing to do, love your wife, and do not be harsh with them. Here's the next part. We talked about this a few weeks ago, but just pretty quickly. The role of the husband, we described what love was not. Love is not feeling-based, at least biblical love is not. It is commitment-based. It doesn't say, I feel like I love you today, so I'll act that way. It's commitment-based. That means on the hardest day you have at work, the worst possible difficult day at work, when you come home, you've still made a commitment to love your wife well. You don't come home and say, I just had a bad day at work, so I'm going to have a bad day at home, okay? That's not how it works. It is not words without actions. 1 John chapter 3 says, let us not love in word and thought, but in deed and truth. We live out love as well. And finally, it is not self-centered, it is Christ-centered. This is so important. And I always just got to pump the brakes here and say, in our culture, in our generation, if you're a young person, if you're a middle-aged person, if you're an older person, we are bombarded with the fact that love is what you feel and it's all about you, right? In fact, just turn on the radio. Almost every lyric is going to be about how you must love yourself first. And I'm just going to tell you, most of us don't have a problem loving ourselves. We do the things we want to do. We struggle to love others as well as we love ourselves. So this love is not self-centered, it's Christ-centered. Christ said to the disciples in John 13, right before his crucifixion, he says, listen, I want you to love one another as I have loved you. And right there, Jesus just pops the standard up for how we love. And that's the standard that men are to love their wives with. Agape love, that's the Bible term for love, indicates a direction of the will, and it finds its joy in the unconditional service of another. Agape love finds its joy in the unconditional service of another. Now, let me give you 4 words. Here's the phrase we covered before, and then I'll give you the 4 words. It is a daily commitment to die to self as you value your wife and place her best interest ahead of your own. This part we covered before, but I never really got a chance to delve into it. I love the word daily. That means you love your wife well today. You're going to love her well tomorrow, too. That's a commitment. It's going to be a commitment to die to self. It's not simply a commitment to do the things you want to do. It's to sometimes not do the things you want to do. And it shows your wife's value when you place her best interest ahead of your own interest. In the text in Ephesians chapter 5, we find this: for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it. Just let me talk with you about those 2 words for a minute, because we are to love our wives, nourishing and cherishing them, just as Christ did the church. Notice how it says in verse 31, by the way, therefore, if you want to nourish and cherish someone, you shall leave your father and mother, be joined to your wife, and you shall become one flesh. Here's the picture: nourishing and cherishing. The word nourishing literally means to provide both physical food, and it's used also in a teaching setting to say that you want to provide brain food or mental food too. You're nourishing this relationship. Okay, let me hit the brakes and say this again. Men, you cannot possibly nourish your wife mentally and emotionally if you sit there in silence all the time. Okay? That's not nourishing. You say, yeah, but it's so hard to think of words to say, right? But that's nourishing. That's the work of loving well. It just doesn't mean you provided physical needs. It means that you provide and nourish as well these other needs. The word cherish is used only one other place in the New Testament. It's used where Paul describes his relationship with the believers in the church in Thessalonica, and he says, we cared for you like a mother cherishes her children. Okay. Now, I don't know about you, but that brings great conviction to me as a husband, because I've seen Kim sometimes. I can remember Kim holding the children and doing it so well. Like, I'd hold the kids, and I'd be thinking one thought: do not drop them, do not drop them, do not drop them, okay? But Kim had a way of cherishing them. In other words, they felt loved by her, okay? It's like whenever you see a mom and a dad first getting started at this, the mom takes the child, and naturally, it's just like her arms are made of gel. They just kind of surround the child, okay? The man gets the baby, and it's like his arms are made of bricks. They just hold the baby, okay? There's a cherishing element there that draws them close. And that's why Paul uses that language. By the way, that same word is used for how we're supposed to care for our wives. So those are the ideas going into it. Here's your 4 ideas, okay? 4 ways to love your wife well, right from the scriptures. Be a leader, be a provider, be an encourager, be a giver. Okay, men, just the men, okay? Say this with me. And women, do not look at your man when he's saying it, okay? I'm just going to tell you, if you look at your man when he's saying it, he's going to be saying, see, I know she thinks I can't do this very well, okay? So here's the deal. I have a friend of mine who worked in a bank. He used to tell me that whenever he would be giving a loan out and the couple would be sitting there, he would say to them, oh, by the way, when were you married? Okay. And he said, Phil, the same thing happens every time. The wife just turns and looks at the husband, okay? And the husband starts to sweat. Okay, like there's pressure. Like, if you wouldn't have looked at me, I'd have had it. Okay, but now they're really struggling. So, by the way, that's just to let you know, if you ever go to the bank to get a loan, as a married couple, when you go in there, husbands, just be rehearsing the date in your head. Okay, you'll look like a superhero husband. Okay, here's the idea. I want the men to say this, but women, I don't want you to be evaluating. This is a lesson for the men. Okay, so men, just say the 4 things underlined with me. 4 ways to love your wife well. Number 1, be a leader, be a provider, be an encourager, be a giver. Let's talk about the first one, be a leader. Servant leadership means you will do more often than you tell. This is an important distinction. Notice what Jesus said in Mark chapter 10. And Jesus called them, that is the disciples, to him and said to them, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. By the way, that's the wrong picture for you to be a husband. Okay? If you say, hey, I'm in charge, okay? I remember the old honeymooners skit where, remember, the husband said something like, hey, I'm the king and you're nothing. You know what that means? And the wife responded by saying, it means you're the king of nothing. Okay, okay. So here, some of you will get that later, okay? That's not the way to husband your wife, okay? No, it's not. Not to lord it over them, not to tell them, why don't you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, but to show them by doing. And that's why it says, and their great ones exercise authority over them, verse 43. But it shall not be so among you, but whoever would be great among you must be the servant, and whoever would be first among you must be the slave. Two incredible words. One is, listen, you're just going to, as a husband, if you want to lead well, you got to serve well. And if you're going to serve well, that may mean you actually realize at some stage in your life isn't really even your own. Even the word slave is used. And then this incredible reminder in Mark 10:45, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. We want to maintain a position that says, I am looking to serve. Lording over someone means you're just telling them all the time. Serving means you're doing things for them. And here's the kicker. Serving well means you're doing things without a bitter spirit. Guys, if you're serving your wife and you're keeping record of it, there is something really, really sick about that. Like, next time you're doing a service task around the house, like maybe it's something that, you see your wife's busy, and so you just jump in and do it, and you're thinking you're owed something. It's not the way a servant works. A servant doesn't work that way. A servant serves, not thinking of what they're owed. I got a couple wonderful quotes on bad leadership from Simon Sinek. Listen what he says. Bad leaders care about who is right. Good leaders care about what is right. Okay, now, confession again. There have been times as a husband where I've cared clearly about who was right. Okay, that's the wrong position, as opposed to what is right. And I love this last statement. A bad leader takes charge of those in their care. A good leader takes care of those in their charge. Did you hear the distinction? One serves, one insists upon maintaining control. There's a wonderful story told about a shepherd in the Middle East. The tour bus was driving, and all of a sudden they passed a man that was behind sheep, and the sheep were walking in front of him. And one of the tourists started screaming from the back, "Stop the bus, stop the bus, stop the bus. I want to get a picture of a shepherd." Okay. And the tour guide said, "We can stop the bus, but that's not the shepherd." And they said, "Well, it looks like a shepherd. It's a man. There's sheep. It must be a shepherd." He said, "The shepherd always leads from the front, and the people willingly follow. That man is driving the sheep because they're going where he's sending them where they don't want to go. He's the town butcher." Okay. There's a difference, right? A shepherd doesn't simply say, I'm driving, do what I do what I say, do what I say, do what I say. A shepherd leads in such a way that there is a willingness to follow. Important distinction, okay? Be a servant. Be a servant. Here's the second one, be a provider. This means you will take responsibilities for the needs and cares of your family. Be a provider. Now, I recognize we live in a generation and a culture where a lot of the wives work too, and sometimes the wife may actually be making more money than the husband. That's not the point of this. The point of this is that the man should feel the weight and responsibility of the needs and cares of his family. And even if your wife makes more, you should feel the weight of it. You should feel the need and the weight of it. If you say, well, my wife's got a great job, and that's great, because, man, I really like to play Fortnite, okay? That's not taking responsibility, okay? You need to take responsibility for the needs and cares of your family. And the Bible's really clear on this, and it's really strong on this. In 1 Timothy chapter 5, it says, but if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Wow, that's strong. In fact, the ESV Study Bible says, provision for one's own family is a spiritual issue of utmost importance. Failure to live out the gospel in this way is tantamount to a denial of the faith. So, you should bear the responsibility of the providing. The providing word is a really cool word, actually. It's taken from the word pro-noeo. It actually means pro, before, noeo, think. It means that to provide well, you got to think beforehand. It's a really cool way to think about it. That whatever we're doing, we should be thinking beforehand or helping others think beforehand. That's why sometimes this word provide in 1 Timothy 5 is translated as the word aim or purpose. It communicates, listen, I thought about where it was going, and I'm trying to get us to where we're going It's bearing the weight and responsibility of the provision of the family. Let's talk about the third world, be an encourager. This means your words will be gracious. They will build up, not tear down. Be an encourager. Now remember, in Colossians chapter 3, we were told not to be harsh. That's because that's just kind of the way that, guys grow up. We just kind of talk smack to each other on the basketball court or whatever. And what the Bible is saying is that is not the way to talk to your wife, okay? Don't be harsh with them. Don't be harsh with them. In fact, here in Ephesians 4:29, we got a great word that actually gives us, this is like perfect man thoughts, okay? Short, brief, to the point. Ephesians 4:29. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that may give grace to those who hear. If you want to be an encourager, here's your 4 thoughts, right? Right thoughts. You cannot be an encourager if you only think of encouraging your wife when you see her. You've got to think the thoughts in advance. You say, where do you get that? It says it comes out of your mouth. That sounds just like Matthew 12:34, where Jesus said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. If you're not thinking these thoughts about your wife, if you're not thinking encouraging thoughts of your wife, you're not going to be able to say them. Or if you are, and women are really good at this intuitively, they're going to smell out the hypocrisy like before you say it. Whoops, sorry about that. Just seeing if you're awake, okay? Can't touch that side anymore. I got that figured out, okay? There's a part of me, like when that happens, I just want to fall over and just see what happens. So now that I told you that, when I really do have a heart attack on stage, everybody's going to say, he's just faking it. Don't worry about it, okay? Okay, here's the idea. 4 ways you want to think about. If you're not thinking the thoughts about your wife, there's no way you're going to be able to make the transition to saying the words to your wife. But here's a great project. Tomorrow when you come home from work, husbands, be thinking just about all the things you appreciate about your wife. Okay? Just be thinking about it. And kind of get a mental list. And when you come in, just tell her what it is. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And then she'll probably fall over with a heart attack. But here's the idea, okay? The idea is this, that you were thinking them so that the words come out. I love the word building up. It's the word edification. It's set in contrast here in this passage to the word corrupting talk. That is, corrupting is the word for stinking, rotting fish used elsewhere in the Bible. So here's the idea. You're not using stinking, rotting language. You're using words that build up or encourage. So you not only want the right thoughts, but you want the right words. Okay? Now, every man has been guilty of this third idea, speaking at the right time. Okay? Notice the words, as it fits the occasion. When your wife starts to talk to you about something, don't simply transition to going back to talking about who the Eagles just acquired in the off season. Okay? There's a time for that, but it's not right then. Okay? I can remember where this came home to me, like real clearly. Kim was pregnant with Ashlyn, so it must have been now better than 20-some years ago, 25 plus years ago. And it was coming into, she must have just had Ashlyn. Oh, this is even worse for me, okay. She just had Ashlyn because it was coming into March Madness and I was watching a game. Okay? And she's got this little baby and she says, hey, can we talk about some parenting stuff? And I'm looking and there's like 2 minutes left in the game. And here's how a man's mind thinks. I got 25 years to talk about that. I got 2 minutes left in my game. Okay. Now, just let me tell you something about the 25 years. Those years went like 2 minutes. Okay. So my wife was clearly right on this. I also know this, that I remember nothing of the game. Okay. Even though I stubbornly stayed and watched the game and then said to her afterwards, hey, the game's over, honey. You want to talk about parenting? No. Okay. Why not now? Because I had chose the wrong occasion to show value to the fact that talking about parenting was really important. Here's the idea. Kim had the right position. I had the wrong position. You and I need to learn the right time. Finally, notice this, that it may give grace. That is the right purpose. What if all of the words we spoke were only to give grace? Okay? Only to pour out a gift of grace, not what was deserved, but only grace. Right thoughts, right words, right time, right purpose. There's where you want to be, man. Just write those 4 down, concentrate on those tomorrow, okay? And that's just a simple way that you can be an encourager. Here's your last one, be a giver. This means you will learn to give up your wants for her needs. In fact, nothing probably communicates love better than that phrase. You will learn to give up your wants for her needs. And no person ever explained love better than Christ there. In fact, I don't have to preach this one. I just have to read it to you. Notice what it says in Ephesians chapter 5. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. We're going to celebrate the Lord's table. Kind of just meld that into the message in a second, because it communicates to us how it was Christ loved us. Right? And if you're a husband today, you should be really wrestling with some thoughts like, Christ gave his very life for me. Is that how I'm thinking about my wife?